Today we're going to share some RV travel safety tips to help keep you and your belongings safe while out there on the road.
And we know what we're talking about here because we're both ex-cops, so we know exactly who and what the bad guys are looking for. If you could ask just one person questions about property crimes and personal safety, who would that be? A police officer, right? Of course, because cops deal with personal property crimes every single day. And you guys just happen to be in luck because you've got two right here in front of you.
Between Rebecca and I, we've responded to countless burglaries, petty and grand larcenies, theft of motor vehicles, simple and aggravated assaults, sexual assaults, and murder. So we definitely feel like we have enough experience under our belts to offer some sound advice on personal and property crimes and how to make you and your property an unattractive target for the bad guys.
And while some of you might be saying right now, but we've always heard that full-time RVing is very safe. Well, that's precisely why we decided to make this video. There seems to be an overly exaggerated false narrative surrounding the safety of the full-time RVing lifestyle. And while we're not saying that full-time RVing is dangerous, because we don't think it is, at least no more dangerous than any other lifestyle out there, it's certainly not a lifestyle exempt from crime as it's sometimes portrayed. Yes, full-time RVers are some of the nicest and most trusting people you'll ever meet, and many of their habits are indicative of that too. But living this lifestyle doesn't guarantee you're always going to be surrounded by other full-timers, whether you're in a campground or not. And it certainly doesn't mean we shouldn't have the same concerns for our safety and property as those living a more conventional lifestyle have.
So if you think about the habits of the full-time RVers, those habits can actually make them more susceptible to crime than someone who lives in the sticks and bricks, is familiar with their city, their neighborhood, and their neighbors, makes the same drive to and from work every day, and just aren't subjected to a bunch of new elements entering into their lives.
And none of that is true for full-time RVers. We are constantly coming into contact with people we don't know and traveling to places we've never been. And to suggest there aren't some inherent risks that come along with that might be a little naive.
And now that we've really got you second guessing whether or not you should hit the road or to stay on it, let us tell you that nothing that we're going to discuss here today is meant to make you fear getting out there and living. In fact, it's quite the opposite. We believe that if you're armed with good information and practices, you'll be able to avoid and even prevent incidents that could bring your adventures to a halt. Now, obviously, there's no amount of advice or preparation that guarantees that you won't ever be a victim of a crime, and that's true for all of us, regardless of your lifestyle. But following some good practices sure will help increase the odds that you're not. So let's get into it.
Okay. So the first thing we want to talk about just happens to be one of the ways lots of us love to RV. And no, we're not talking about boondocking. Boondocking just means dry camping, and you can dry camp anywhere. Boondocking also has nothing to do with location, but it is location that we want to talk about, specifically the secluded ones.
Who doesn't love getting off the grid every once in a while, where it's just you and nature, no people, traffic, or noise, just feeling like you're the only one in the world out there in the middle of nowhere? And we get it. We appreciate that too. But RVers aren't the only ones that love secluded locations. Criminals love them too.
A secluded location is to a criminal what a piece of cake is to Sal. Just too tempting to pass up.
Delicious.
Why? Because seclusion allows a bad guy to do whatever it is they want to do without drawing attention to themselves or their criminal activity. If they want to steal your property, whether that's your RV or your belongings inside it, a bad guy couldn't ask for a better location than a secluded one.
And a secluded location doesn't just mean that there's less of a chance for the bad guy to be seen. It also means that he or she often has more time to complete the job and that they're going to be able to see you coming back to your rig long before you see them in it. And this means fleeing the location and being identified is less of a concern.
But that's just a brief property crime scenario we went over. And we're going to talk more about that in the next segment of the video. But what we really want to discuss right now when it comes to choosing a camping location, specifically a secluded one, is personal crimes, meaning a crime against you, your person, your body. And this could be in the form of a simpler aggravated assault, a sexual assault, and even murder. Now, when you think about these types of crimes, you might visualize a physical altercation taking place, right? The victim could be fighting for his or her life. There could be yelling, screaming, things being thrown and broken, or even gunshots being fired. There could be a lot of noise. But just like criminals don't want to be seen committing their crimes, they don't want to be heard either. And that's why a secluded location is the ideal setting for bad guys to commit these types of crimes. No one can see or hear you when you're fighting for your life.
Now, does any of this mean that you should never camp in remote locations? No, it doesn't. Chances are a scenario like that will never happen. But that doesn't mean that you should be naive enough to believe it never could.
So, if secluded locations are where you prefer to camp, then we suggest a few things. First, your goal should always be to deter crime from happening in the first place. And one great deterrent is outdoor motion sensor lights. No criminal wants to be lit up at nighttime because that means you can see him, but he can't see you, and that puts him at a huge disadvantage.
Another awesome deterrent is a dog. Never ever underestimate the safety that comes along with traveling with a dog. And we're not just talking about German Shepherds, Rottweilers, Pit Bulls, and all the other breeds people just inherently know not to mess with. We're talking about any dog, even the 5-pounders frequently referred to as yappers.
Dogs in general are awesome deterrents, especially if you've got a really big dog with a deep and fierce-sounding bark. No one in their right mind is going to walk through your front door after hearing that. But those yappers will sometimes notify you of a disturbance outside your rig before the big dogs will, even before those motion lights kick on. So any size dog is better than not having one at all because they all make you aware that something's not right, which then gives you time to prepare and react, and that is probably one of the best defenses you can have.
Okay, so the next thing that's really important when camping in secluded areas is making sure you have cell phone reception in case you need to make a call for help. But this also means that you need to know where you are. The first question a 911 operator is going to ask you is, what is your location? Not having this information defeats the purpose of having a cell phone. But what if you already know in advance you're not going to have cell phone reception? Then tell a friend where you're going to be and for how long, so that they know to send help if they don't hear from you at that time. Of course, this does nothing to help you at the exact time you need it, but it may assist in the recovery of your body.
Brutal. Okay, another option is to carry a firearm. 3 things we want to cover here though. 1, gun laws change from state to state, so you'll need to know what they are every time you cross a state line. 2, never discuss with anyone you don't know or trust whether or not you're in possession of a firearm, what type of firearm it is, or where you store it. And 3, if you're going to be in possession of a firearm, you better know how to use it and be willing to use it.
If carrying a firearm is something that you're considering, but you haven't pulled the trigger on yet, no pun intended, because you have little or no experience with them, then sign up for a class and see afterwards if it's the direction that you want to go into. But don't just carry a firearm around that you don't know how to use or that you're not willing to use if faced with a situation that would call for it, because all you're going to do is either hurt yourself or provide the bad guy with another weapon to use against you.
Okay, so we've touched base on how secluded locations really work in a criminal's favor, regardless of the type of crime being committed. We also provide suggestions for deterring it, and honestly, 99% of the time that really should do the trick. But that doesn't mean you don't have to be prepared for the possibility of having to face a threat head-on should the bad guy not be deterred. And this is where most people make their biggest mistake. It's called complacency. People get complacent in all aspects of life whenever they haven't had a bad experience with something in particular or anything. They find comfort in the fact that it, whatever it may be, has never happened to them. So when and if it does, they're usually ill-prepared and ill-equipped to handle it. The whole point we really want to drive home about camping in secluded areas is that while the chances of you being a victim are low, if you are, being out in the middle of nowhere with no way to summon help and no one around to see or hear is probably the worst scenario you could ask for. Forget about your RV and your property for a minute because all that stuff can be replaced. We're talking about someone who intends on causing you bodily harm or death. What are you going to do? And that's the point. What steps will you take to deter the crime? And if that doesn't work, what are you going to do to protect yourself? Knowing this in advance may very well save your life. It is neither dumb nor paranoid to think about this and to prepare for it. Anyone who tells you it is, you should never take another piece of advice from them again. That is someone who does not live in the real world and doesn't believe bad people really exist. Just like people in sticks and bricks make escape plans in case there's a fire in their house, and homeowners purchase firearms in case there's an intruder, there's nothing wrong with full-time RVers planning how they will protect themselves and their families if faced with a dangerous situation.
So don't live in fear, live with confidence, knowing that while something like this may never happen, if it does, you'll be prepared.
Okay, now we want to talk a little about property crimes, because RVers are victims of it, and most times it's because they haven't taken any precautions to prevent it. We see it every single day, regardless of where we're camped. Bikes and generators left unsecured, purses, wallets and cell phones sitting in plain view inside vehicles, people leaving their RVs without locking the door behind them, all kinds of stuff. And we actually see it more in campgrounds than we did on the streets as police officers. It's like people think there's some sort of safety bubble around them and their property anytime they're in a campground. Like there's this belief that people with bad intentions, including thieves, don't go camping. And while we did mention earlier that criminals love secluded locations to carry out their little dirty deeds, that doesn't mean they won't commit crimes elsewhere or under different circumstances. Most thieves are opportunists, and many understand the art of hiding right out there in the open. And a busy campground is the perfect setting for that.
We do understand that there's a certain sense of security that comes along with being surrounded by people with the same interests and even backgrounds, or people living the same lifestyle. And I think some of this is even justified, especially in places like military campgrounds. But even military security officers don't run rap sheets or request character references before allowing people on base. So while being surrounded by people we have things in common with might make us feel safer, it doesn't mean that we actually are. So when we start talking about property crimes, we're big advocates of securing anything that you don't want or can't afford to be stolen.
Of course, we're not talking about chaining down the table and chairs in front of your RV or staking the bundles of wood you just bought to the ground. That might be overkill, and aesthetically anyways, could take away from that cozy campsite vibe you might be going for, right? But there's really no reason not to secure things like bicycles, generators, your tow or towed vehicle, and even your rig. And here's the thing, it literally takes seconds to secure any of it. And I promise you, whatever locking mechanism you choose to purchase to secure your property, it's going to be a heck of a lot cheaper than replacing your expensive equipment.
Okay, so we're going to talk about things we see left unsecured in campgrounds all the time, but also the very cheap and easy ways to secure them. And we're going to eliminate things like we just mentioned, the tables, chairs, firewood, but also coolers and grills and things like that. While I think we all can agree that these things could be stolen, they're not things that are necessarily going to break the bank or our hearts if they are. The items we're talking about are expensive to replace, and without them could ruin a camping trip or cause a lot of inconvenience. So let's start with
the generator. Generators range in price from hundreds to thousands of dollars. They are not cheap. So returning to your campsite and discovering it's gone is going to hurt even more when you realize you could have deterred the thief with a $10 lock and chain in less than a minute of your time securing it to the frame of your rig. To us, it makes absolutely no sense not to do that. Not only is this a lot of money lost, but if you're dry camping, it can also be a huge inconvenience and turn what could have been a great camping experience into a miserable one.
bicycles. No one wants to get their bicycle stolen, no matter how little it costs. After all, you brought it with you. Most likely it's because you were looking forward to using it. But some of the bikes we see sitting around unsecured, they cost thousands of dollars. And I mean, these things are really nice. You don't even have to know much about a bike to see that they're expensive just by looking at them. They belong to mountain bikers, marathon riders, other professionals and athletes, and just anyone with a passion for riding that wants a great bike to do it on. But unfortunately, we know many people have had their very expensive bikes stolen from campgrounds and elsewhere, all because they didn't lock them up. So what's the price of a good bike lock these days anyway? $100, $200? Well, if a bike costs $2,000, 10% of that to deter a thief isn't bad investment in our opinion. Having said that though, we all know that you can get a much cheaper lock than that. And we're going to tell you in a few minutes why most times the price of the lock doesn't matter.
Your tow or towed vehicle and its contents. Two things here. Whether you're in a campground or not, please don't leave your vehicle running and unattended. We're not talking about when you're backing in your RV and you have to exit the vehicle to gauge where you're at in the site. We're talking about exiting your running vehicle and walking away from it to go inside your RV, a store, a public bathroom, or wherever. It is literally just a turn of the wrist to turn off the car and a press of the button to lock it after exiting. It takes mere seconds to secure your vehicle. But you know what else takes seconds? A thief hopping in it and driving off because you left it unlocked and running, okay? So while you're busy pooping in your RV, your car is gonna be 20 miles down the interstate, well on its way to destination Chop Shop, okay? Don't leave your car running and unattended. The second part to this is items of importance and valuables left in plain sight in your car. First of all, these items should never be left in your car, but if, for whatever reason they are, don't leave them in plain sight. We can't tell you how many times as police officers we've responded to calls for a B&E to a vehicle and upon arrival learned that the car door was unlocked and the purse, wallet, computer, money, whatever, was either right there on the front passenger seat, the dash, or on top of the console. And really, when you have those things in plain sight, the car door being unlocked isn't that significant. Those things most likely would have been stolen even if the doors were locked. So look, in my opinion, incidents like this shouldn't even be classified as crimes. They should be considered lessons learned. And that's all I have to say about that.
Your RV. When we start talking about your most valuable property as an RVer, we can't leave out the RV itself. In our opinion, your RV is most susceptible to theft when it's in a secluded location like the area that we were talking about at the beginning of the video, or an RV storage facility where people have access to it on a daily basis versus a busy campground or a national park.
And while some people may say, well, I never camp in secluded areas or store my RV, our response is, but what if you ever do? Or what's wrong with adding an extra layer of security to your very expensive RV, which may also double as your home and transportation and cause a huge inconvenience if it's stolen?
We use a proven industry's trailer lock to secure our Airstream. It costs less than $300 and takes us approximately 30 seconds to install and remove. And that's a fraction of what we spent on the rig and a small amount of time to protect it. And if it deters a thief from stealing it, then it's worth every penny. We don't want you guys to think that there aren't thieves out there looking for unsecured rigs that they can back their truck up to, hook up, and drive off with, because there are. People get their RVs stolen. It's worth the investment to deter a thief from choosing yours to steal.
Leaving your RV unlocked whenever you leave. If there's a thief in your campground, whether they're camping there or not, don't tempt him or her with an open invitation to your home and valuables. Remember, most thieves are opportunists. If they notice you didn't lock your RV door before leaving in your car or taking your dog for a walk, they're going to be in there as soon as you're out of sight. Not locking your doors, whether on an RV, a vehicle, or sticks and bricks, is a really bad and unsafe habit. And here's the part that doesn't make much sense. Some people who leave their RV doors unlocked when they're not present wouldn't dare do that at their sticks and bricks. And chances are they probably know their neighborhood and neighbors really well. But for some reason, all that common sense and reasoning flies out the window as soon as they enter a campground filled with a bunch of strangers. Remember the safety bubble we talked about earlier? Okay, so I know many will say, well, I don't keep anything valuable on my rig, so if they want it, they can have it. Okay, so you're not worried about a monetary loss. Great. The only thing you should be concerned about now is returning sooner than the bad guy thought you would and surprising him. Now this property crime may escalate into a person's crime. Lock your doors, people.
So now that we're nearing the end of this video, this is the time where some people will say one of two things. The first one is, I've been camping for 150 years and my RV has never been broken into and nothing has ever been stolen.
And to that we say, congratulations. And we hope you make it to 200 years of incident-free camping, because to break a lucky streak like that would be disheartening. And a lucky streak it is, because we are more than confident that lots of other people camp just the way you do, but have had property stolen from them. But we would also say, since when do people only prepare for things they know are going to happen? They don't. They also prepare for things that could happen. Do millions of people purchase and install alarm systems because they know their house is going to get broken into? No. They purchase and install alarm systems to deter a burglar in case their house becomes a target. Do millions of homeowners purchase firearms because they know there's going to be an intruder? No. They purchase firearms in case there's one.
And the other thing is, if a thief wants to steal your stuff, they're going to steal your stuff, whether it's secured or not. Simple bolt cutters in a few seconds is all it takes. And our response to that is?
You're right. A few burglary tools and a little bit of time is all it would take. But if that's your only response, then you're missing the point we've been making throughout the entire video, which is criminals love easy scores. Anytime they are given the choice between stealing a, let's say, generator that's locked up and one that's not, 90% of the time, they're going to steal the one that's not. And especially in a campground setting where a good majority of generators aren't secured. Why would they choose to spend any more time or make any more noise than necessary trying to steal your property when all they have to do is walk 3 RVs down and steal your neighbors because they left it unsecured? There are a lot of dumb thieves out there, but they're not that dumb. The bottom line is this: the easier you make it for a thief to steal your stuff, the more likely it is that's exactly what they're going to do.
Okay, so what can you do to help police in locating your property after it's been stolen? Well, you can provide the serial numbers and pictures for the stolen property. There are serial numbers on practically everything. So if it's important to you or it's expensive, jot down the serial number and take pictures just in case it's stolen.
And we know you're probably thinking that providing serial numbers and pictures to the police in order to assist in the recovery of your property is still a long shot. And if we're being really honest here, yes, it is possible you will never see your stuff again. And even if you do, it may have suffered some serious damage. But having those serial numbers might prove more helpful than you think. And that's because a good majority of thieves sell their stolen goods to pawn shops, who in return record the serial numbers and many times place all new incoming merchandise on a hold. That hold, which is just a time frame for which the property won't be sold, can be anywhere from 24 hours up to several days. Property detectives, who usually have great working relationships with the owners and staff of pawn shops in their jurisdiction, also have access to databases that track incoming merchandise and serial numbers. So the sooner you provide those serial numbers to the detective or police officer, the greater your chances are of recovering your property.
But what if you didn't write down or log the serial numbers? Well, that's where advising the police of any markings of your property comes into play. Things like engraving, scratches, chips, or anything unique to your property that only you would know about. Having this information or serial numbers is what allows a detective to tell a pawn shop owner to remove the items from the sale floor, so he or she can collect it as evidence. This is good for you, the property owner, because it means that it won't be sold to someone else, making it much harder to track down.
So jot down those serial numbers and markings of anything that's expensive or has sentimental value. Even consider making a few markings of your own in an inconspicuous spot on those items that don't have serial numbers, or that do, but you just want to add another identifying feature. And secure your belongings, even if it's with a $5 lock and chain. Anything is better than nothing because it all acts as a deterrent. It puts the odds in your favor that a thief will bypass your property and look for unsecured property elsewhere. And that's what it's all about, putting the odds in your favor.
And on that note, thanks for watching. Don't forget to give this video a like, hit that notification button so you'll know when our next video comes out, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. It all helps support what we're doing here and the time that we put into it. And until next time, we'll catch you down the road.
Bye. Thanks for watching.
Take care now.